Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm with Mr. Universe and biomechanics expert Doug Brignole. Hey Doug.
Hey, how are you, Mo?
Very good, thank you. Today is a special day because we're going to release True Bodybuilding. So for those who don't know about this, this is a program about how to start, what you need to do, sets and reps, and all the things that a bodybuilder is required to do.
And how to prepare for a show, how to prepare for the stage presentation.
Right. But before we do that, I wanted to talk to you a while ago, but I think today it's important to discuss it, which is motivation. Many people, like they say, okay, I'm going to start in New Year my fitness goals,
Right.
Or they set goals because they have a certain event. So they have to wait for a time or for something to start.
Mm-hmm.
You've been training for 42 years. What is the common thing that you saw people use as a motivation?
Well, it's probably universally true that everyone wants to look better, right? A lot of people give it what we call lip service, right? Everyone complains that they're too fat. They want to lose some fat. Everyone complains that they're too skinny. They want to gain some muscle. Everyone complains that they want to be more tone. And yeah, that's a worthy goal. It's understandable that people would want to look better and feel better and be healthier. But as we've talked about before, there's a cost benefit to everything. And the cost of something is perceived differently between different people. So if I tell someone, eat like this, that person over there might say, all right, that's not quite what I like, but okay, fine. This person goes, oh no, I can't eat like that. Right? So it's the same diet, right? But different people have different perceptions of the cost, different perceptions of the sacrifice that it requires. And so what I think happens very often is that people get excited about something, and in their moment of zeal, their excitement, the first thing they think is that, oh, I can handle the cost. I'll do whatever it takes, right? But that's because right now you're on this very enthusiastic level, right? But maintaining that level of enthusiasm every day, week after week, month after month, is different, right? It's a little bit like romance, right? Some people fall in love and they think, oh my God, I could be with this person forever. And then you ask them 6 months later, how's it going? They go, eh. And that's because I think people are very emotional about their perception of what something requires. When they're emotionally high, they think it's easy. When it becomes a grind, when it becomes a day-to-day thing, it's a little different. But everyone has a little different level, as I said, not only of the way they perceive the cost, also the way they perceive the reward, and also just, if you do an exercise or you do exercise for a month or two and your genetics responds, your genetics allows you to get a decent response to exercise, you will be more motivated because you're getting, fairly good reward for your effort. But depending on your genetics, you might not get such a dramatic result, even though you're putting in just as much effort as the next person. And it's logical that if a person doesn't feel rewarded for their efforts, they're going to be less motivated.
So how to avoid that, like the demotivation?
Well, I mean, obviously genetics is genetics, right? We can't change that. That's why I always tell people, look, if I were not as knowledgeable as I am, and I was hearing a bunch of different recommendations from everyone, and I try a particular program and it doesn't give me the result I want, it's easy for me to blame the program. I might try a second program and a third program and a fourth program. And that's why in our course, we explain the why, right? So it's very, very obvious, very logical, very clear why this thing, this exercise, let's say, loads the muscle more than that exercise based on just simple engineering. And the other factors involve the neurological factors and the anatomical factors. And it's important to know that you're doing the best thing you can do. And that way, you don't have to wonder, would another program work better? Would another set of exercises work better? So, call it the process of elimination, right? None of us actually get as fast a reward as we would like to get. We would like to snap our fingers and be in shape tomorrow, right? So everyone would like progress to be faster. But the first thing you want to check off is, am I doing the best exercises? Am I doing the right frequency, the right intensity, the right everything? Then you can say, okay, what's left? Well, the diet is left, right? And genetics is left, and maybe supplementation is left. But, you need to check these marks off and decide whether or not you have a legitimate reason to complain that, I know a lot of people, as I'm sure you do too, that, they buy a program and they put it on a shelf and they do it sporadically, and then they complain that it's not working. It's like, well, you're not actually applying it.
Right. It's not because you own it that will work.
Right. That's not enough.
Right.
You have to do it. You have to apply it.
Yes. During the years of personal training, what is the biggest issue that you faced with clients who, even though you're with them, they still cancel and create a reason for the cancellation, but that they are trying to get away, to avoid working out?
Well, that doesn't happen very often. I guess you could say, well, maybe it's because they're happy with me. They're happy with my personality. They're happy with the level of knowledge I have. One client tells me that I'm the best trainer because he realizes that I have an ability, as most trainers should have the ability, to read the client, to sense that what the client needs and what the client doesn't need, right? So this particular client that I'm thinking about is, he's very, very impatient, right? So he doesn't like doing high reps. His attention span is very short, right? And so that's fine. You can work with that, right? So I never have him doing more than 10 reps in a set with a weight that doesn't create too much pain, too much fatigue, but I never let him stop. Right. So we do chest, back, bicep, tricep, shoulders, this. So in 15, 20 minutes, he's sweating. But no one exercise, no one set burns him so much that he gets impatient or complains. So he has a low tolerance for pain. But this is one way a trainer can cause the exercise to sort of creep up on the person. So they're sweating and they're huffing and they're puffing and they're getting the stimulation that they need to the degree that they can tolerate. And yet each individual set doesn't create so much psychological burden. So things like that oftentimes determine whether or not the client is happy with you or not. But needless to say, there will be people who say, I can't afford it anymore. Something happened. Hopefully, trainers that are out there have a nice personality, right? Some people think that the best way to approach their clients is by being a drill sergeant. 5 more, harder. Come on. Don't be a sissy. It's like, that doesn't work for most people. It might work for some people, but generally speaking, that's not the best approach. So if that client cancels on that trainer, I would say that's the reason, right? So you can't just assume, oh, he just didn't want to work out anymore. That guy was just lazy. So maybe you should take it as a little bit of an indicator that you need to, alter your approach a little bit.
Right. So the bottom point is, whether you have a trainer or a program, you have to put in the work.
Yes, you have to put in the work. And by the way, there's a lot of people that think that because they've paid for their trainer to come and meet them 3 times a week, that they will get results. And I have to remind them, it's like, well, I see you 3 days, 3 hours of the week. How many more hours of the week are there that you're doing what you shouldn't be doing, right? You're eating, right? Also, did I tell you that you should be walking for a half an hour to an hour in between our workouts? Have you done that? Oh, no, you haven't done that, right? So yeah, you have to put in the work, yes, but there are lifestyle factors and there are genetic factors that the trainer does not have complete control of. And sometimes the trainer has to be the brunt of the accusation why that person didn't succeed. It's like, well, I paid $300 a week or whatever it is you're charging. You know, shouldn't I? No, it's like saying I'm going to church every Sunday. So suddenly, you know, I can do bad things and God will forgive me. Right. People sometimes they go to church on Easter and Christmas, and that's it twice a year. They go, well, I let God know I was here. Not quite enough.
All right. So, true bodybuilding. So what is this program about?
Well, you know, this program is fantastic because it covers everything. It covers every question that someone would ask. If they say, what do I need to do? How do I need to eat? What's the frequency of this and that? I want to enter a contest. How do I do that? How do I look for a contest? How do I prepare? What about the oil? What about the tan? What about this? What about my music? You know, it answers every question you could have, whether or not you want to compete or not. And I don't know any other program that does that.
And who's this program for?
Well, it's for, as the name indicates, true bodybuilding, right? It would be the person who wants the truth about physique development, right? They want the nuts and bolts. They want to be guided. They want to be taken by the hand, taken under our wing, so to speak. You know, come along, we'll show you the ropes. You know, this is how it's done. You know, sometimes a novice person with just dreams of building a great physique looks at a fitness magazine. Maybe they see a picture of Jay Cutler or Sean Ray with a magnificent physique, and they show them doing one set of exercises. Okay, well, I need more, right? That person would be saying, I need more. How do I start? Is that particular program good for everybody? Or is it only good for someone who looks like you? Is that a novice program? Is it an advanced program? Is it an intermediate program? You know, how do you eat? I mean, obviously a magazine article can't cover all that stuff, but I think that's probably the problem that, you know, a lot of novice people would say exists, is that there's not a lot of programs. I don't know of any that basically help you from the very beginning. Here's the best exercise for the pectoral muscle and why it's the best. Here's the one that's not good, and here's why it's not good. Right? So you understand all the nuts and bolts of what resistance training requires mechanically, right? Then you learn about, you know, how many times I should do that, how many sets, how many reps, how much frequency, how I should eat, how I should sleep. These are all questions that people have, but I don't know of any program or any book that basically tells all of that in the detail that we talk about.
You know, many people as bodybuilders fail, especially those who want to compete, because it's either lack of knowledge or lack of guidance, right? And I feel that this program basically covers a lot of these aspects because it's based on your 42 years of experience in the field at a high level. Beside the training part, we have Jerry Brainham, who has 62 years of experience in the nutrition part. So both, you have like 100 years of experience guiding you to achieve your goal.
Yeah, the Jerry's experience and my experience, the years together we have total over 100 hours. We calculated it.
100 years.
Yeah, 100 years. I'm sorry. And that's a lot of information that's been gathered by him and by me that is useful to someone. I mean, it's almost like, you know, having Jerry or me as a friend that you can sit in the living room with, you know, and you say, hey, Doug, you know, how did you start? How did you know when you were ready for a contest? You know, how did you prepare for your posing routine? It's like, you know, what could be better than having someone who's got decades of experience telling you personally, you know, how to start and how to proceed and how to go from this to this.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about some of the includes of this program. So our program includes 3 workout programs, meaning like the first one that explains the workout splits. Second one shows the movements, like how you should do them, machine setup, sets and reps and all that. And there is also the Brick 20 as a bonus in the workout. Mm-hmm. We're also adding different type of workout for different people, if they are a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So can you tell us a little bit about that so people get a full idea of that?
You know, it's a common question, but it's a naive question when people say, you know, I want you to tell me exactly how many sets and reps to do. And I've noticed that there are a lot of people that when they go buy a fitness magazine, you can tell I'm old school because we don't go buy a fitness magazine anywhere. We used to go to the newsstand, right, and buy it off the shelf. It's like, I don't think that even happens in maybe at the grocery store. And they'll take a program that's written this many sets, this many reps of this particular exercise. And another interesting point is the person who's demonstrating the exercises is usually very, very well developed. And so the assumption, which is completely incorrect, is that that person looks that way because this is the workout they do. Well, I can tell you from decades of experience, that is not how those magazine articles end up on the in the magazine, right? What ends up happening more often than not is the magazines tell the champion who has, you know, an attractive body and therefore will help sell the magazine. We want you to write an article about an all dumbbell workout or an all cable workout or an endurance versus power workout because they want to put that on the cover because then they sell more magazines, right? So more often than not, you know, if the guy, the model, the author wants to be included in the magazine, he ends up having to sort of like invent a series of workouts, of exercises, you know, a program that is not necessarily what he would do and not even what he would recommend to you, but it's what the magazine wants them to write. And if they don't comply, then they won't be in the magazine and then they won't get the exposure. So the fact is that there is no one program that suits everybody. Right? It depends on a number of factors. It depends on, first of all, your starting level, right? Are you really out of shape or are you semi-moderate or advanced right now? What are your genetics like? You know, what are your goals? What is your age? What are your injuries? What is your time availability? What is your tolerance to fatigue? I mean, these are all factors that go in there. We're going to try to create a program that gives you maybe level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 8 levels, right? But even still, to some degree, that requires the person to identify which level they're actually at, right? Because it's easy for a person who's novice or maybe moderate level to automatically say, well, I want the best. I want the most. I'm going to do the advanced level workout, and they might not be ready for that yet. But, well, because we can't monitor that, but we will give guidelines and we will explain, you know, this is the easiest workout. This is where a person should start if they have not yet been introduced to much weight training. This is the next step up, the next step up, the next step up, the next step up. And of course, every time you go up, you're adding sets, you're adding intensity, you're adding frequency, you're adding duration. So it assumes that you have the time, right? Because volume of sets, more sets takes time, right? If you want maximum muscle growth, you can't do it in 3 sets. No matter how much intensity you use, you need enough sets. You need volume. So, but we spell all that thing out for you, so you'll understand, you know, kind of what it takes to go from one level to the next.
Right, and it's covering like basically everything in the same program.
Yeah.
Beside the training part, which, as I said, it's very detailed. We're talking about nutrition from 2 different aspects. Nutrition as like protein, carbs, fat, and all that, and supplements. But we also talked about nutrition as a bodybuilder. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, look, I mean, they're not that different, right? So if you look at the average diet that would be considered a very healthy diet, for example, you need to have enough protein just to be healthy, right? So if you are a bodybuilder, it doesn't mean that you need substantially more protein. You might need a little bit more protein, but it does emphasize the importance of protein. So if you're not bodybuilding and your goal is to be healthy, you can probably get away with, 50 grams of protein a day, 20 grams of protein a day. But if you are bodybuilding and your muscles need repair, your need for protein increases. Not that you need more of it so much, although that's partly true, but that there's a bigger consequence to pay if you don't get enough, right? If you're trying for health, there's very little consequence to some days eating only 10 grams of protein, right? But if you're trying to bodybuild and you're, creating a protein need in the gym by, working those muscles and them requiring, rebuilding, then the need increases. Now, bodybuilding also has to do with body fat, right? So calories matter, right? So calories would also matter if your pursuit is health. But, I call them like, imagine that you have a stereo system and you have the equalizer, you have your treble, you have your bass, and, you have your dials that you can basically shape the music with. That's kind of what diet does. It kind of shapes the physique, right? So they are our switches, the switches we flip, the knobs we turn, a little more of this, a little less of that, and it really helps mold your body.
Another thing we talked about in the program is posing. So let me tell you my opinion about bodybuilding today. When I grew up, I had the book of Frank Zane, Arnold, I'm from Tunisia, so we didn't have access to many other bodybuilders, but that's the physique that I grew up admiring, Today, the physique, the look is completely different. It's too bulky, and you're coming from the golden era where it was an art to present the physique. Tell us why it's lost. What happened to bodybuilding?
Yeah, it's a sad thing, actually. I grew up, I was 14, 15 years old when I started. And that was right around 1974, 75. And yeah, bodybuilding, was relatively in its infancy still. I mean, we were past the Steve Reeves, John Grimmick era, but bodybuilding was still very young. Arnold and Frank Zane and Ed Corney, they were, the artists. Arnold less so in terms of his presentation, although he tried, right? I think he took some ballet lessons.
Right.
He tried to be more artistic and more graceful. But the real artists, Frank Zane, Ed Corney, Bob Paris, Muhammad Makawi, they were artists on stage and they were dramatic and the physiques were beautiful. And yeah, it was very, very inspiring to me. I was never inspired by the bigger, bulkier physiques, nor by the way the bigger, bulkier physiques posed. Now, I just caught myself thinking, that why was it that the bigger, bulkier physiques, people with bigger, bulkier physiques, didn't generally pose as gracefully as those with the smaller physiques? And I think it has to do with athleticism. I think it has to do with a somatotype coordination thing. Like, there are exceptions to the rule. Like you can get a linebacker who might be able to dance pretty well. But generally speaking, the people that are more graceful, physically graceful, are the people that are more ectomorphic, mesomorphic. It's just a tendency. It's not an absolute rule. But, Lou Ferrigno had a magnificent physique, but he could never pose like Frank Zane or Ed Corney. And it would have been good if he could. It would have helped him, I think, if they could. But, their strong point was mass. So when they would do a double bicep, they would just go big, whereas, someone like Zane or Corney, they would do the double bicep in a very artistic way. And it really depends on, you can teach posing, you can learn posing, but you cannot teach grace. To some degree, grace is innate. You either have it or you don't. But of course, how you move on stage and the physique you develop are two different things. And I would say that bodybuilding sort of just went the way of drugs. I kind of have to say. I mean, Sean Ray and also Flex Wheeler, had a lot of mass, but were very good. I mean, Flex Wheeler could do a splits.
Right.
He was unusually flexible and unusually graceful and unusually elegant in his posing, despite having an enormous amount of mass. There are a couple of others that, kind of leaned in that direction, but I can tell if I was watching somebody on stage, I could tell in seconds who just naturally has the innate ability to pose gracefully and who doesn't, just by the way they hold their hands, just by the way they hold their head. I mean, there's certain things you can sort of tell. But of course, coaching helps. Coaching always helps. And I would like to see artistic bodybuilding come back. I would like to see, bodybuilders pursuing grace and class and art on stage rather than just bigness, and rely less on the drugs and more on the definition and the symmetry and the presentation.
Some of the athletes you just mentioned have an athletic background, which explains why they were so graceful.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say they were graceful because they were athletes. I would say they were athletes because they were graceful.
Right.
If you play football and if you're a receiver, you know how your body moves, and that's part of it, is like your body talks to you. And to different degrees, we either hear it or we don't. It's hard to have someone who's really, really graceful explain what they're doing, because it's so natural to them that they hardly even know they're doing it.
Right. We learn, I think, different reflexes from different sports. And then when you choose one sport, your body will use the reflexes you used from other disciplines toward whatever you're doing at that time.
That's probably true. Yeah.
We also talked about Bodybuilding Association and how, what's the difference between them?
Right.
So what do you think about the Bodybuilding Association, the rules and what they're doing? Are they helping bodybuilding or destroying bodybuilding?
Well, that's a good question. I think at the end of the day, a person needs to ask themselves, why am I doing this? What's my goal? At all times, we should say, what's my goal? What's my motivation? What am I doing this for? Why am I investing all this time here instead of there, instead of doing something else? And the first thing that probably has to be acknowledged is that very, very few bodybuilders will ever make it to the Mr. Olympia stage. The number of bodybuilders that are out there, and by the way, what I just said may not even be entirely a fair thing to say, because I just sort of suggested that the Mr. Olympia is the top contest. Maybe some people regard it as a top contest because, it was marketed that way. I mean, Joe Weider and Ben Weider, because of the Weider magazines, did a very good job of making it seem like the Olympia was the pinnacle. There are a lot of NABA bodybuilders in the world and other associations that could clearly qualify to be on the Mr. Olympia stage, and yet they don't qualify because the IFBB chooses to not recognize NABA achievements. If you go to a NABA contest anywhere in the world, but especially the NABA world or the NABA universe, you will see bodybuilders oftentimes that could easily be on the Mr. Olympia stage, but they're not allowed to be on the Mr. Olympia stage because you have to be acknowledged. So let me just say that to get to the highest level of bodybuilding, whatever organization it happens to be, whether it's IFBB, whether it's WFF, World Fitness Federation, whether it's NABA, you need to have, first of all, great genetics. You cannot get to that level without great genetics. And then on top of the great genetics, you have to have an awful lot of work, an awful lot of sacrifice, and an awful lot of knowledge. At least enough knowledge to get, that's what, like we talked about before, the good road versus the bad road.
Right.
You know, you can compensate for some lack of knowledge with just sheer work. You know, you wouldn't have to work quite that hard if you took the smooth road, if you took the smarter path. So you can compensate for a little bit of lack of knowledge. You can compensate for a lot of lack of knowledge with just a lot of work. But then, of course, you have a lot of wear and tear on the body. And we've seen how that turns out. But, you know, Bob Gruskin was a trainer who trained quite a number of Mr. America and Mr. Universe competitors. I met him when I was 17 years old, and he told me on day one, he said, you know, very, very few bodybuilders ever make it to the top. And those who do make it to the top don't necessarily have, you know, guaranteed finances for the rest of their life, which I'll talk about in just a second. But, you know, you need to make sure that you have backup, that you're doing something, whether you're building a business or whether you're getting an education or whatever, because at some point you're going to have to pay bills. And at some point you're not going to be young. So today you might be 20, you might be 30, you might be saying, hey, I want to be a bodybuilder. I'm going to sacrifice everything. Okay, fine. But someday you're going to be 60, and someday you're going to be 70, and someday you're going to be 80, hopefully. And someday you may have a wife, and you may have a family. You may have 3 kids, 4 kids who all rely on you to, you know, provide them with a roof over their head and food on the table. So I know some people that, you know, have won top titles. People, I don't want to mention names because I don't want to disappoint fans, but the fact is a lot of these people are struggling for finances right now. You know, they don't have, let's just say they don't have everything they want. They don't live as well as they'd like to live. They're struggling because at the end of the day, you need to have a steady stream of income later in life. And winning a top title does not do that, right? You still need to have revenue. So you need to provide a service. You need to provide a product. You need to provide something later so that you can still survive economically.
Some people who win these big titles also get sponsors that will allow them. Maybe they don't make money in the show, but from the sponsors, they will be the representative of a magazine or supplements.
Yes, that's true. Look, it's absolutely true when that person is current. If you're the current Mr. Universe winner, current Mr. Olympia winner, yes. If you've got a following, if you've got, you know, a lot of Instagram followers, Facebook followers, you know, then the manufacturers say, hey, tell them you take this protein powder and then we'll give you this many dollars. Okay, that's true. But what happens 10 years later when you're not current? I mean, there's new people who are entering the bodybuilding market every day. And a lot of the people that are entering the market today barely remember. And they've been informed who won this contest 10 or 20 years ago. But the more in the past that your current bodybuilding contest winning has been, the less likely it is for you to get sponsors. Unless you've done something other recently that has brought your name into the spotlight, and then sponsors may want to go with you then. But, you know, it's an unfortunate fact. You know, it's no different than actors, right? If you're a top actor today, everyone loves you. If you stopped acting 10 years ago, not so much.
My favorite actor is Clint Eastwood from day one till now.
Yeah.
Still love him. Anyway, regarding the association, you mentioned in the program that you love the Muscle Beach and the AAU. Is that a particular reason for that?
Again, look, this is me. This is my personal opinion. You know, I don't compete. I'm fairly retired now, I guess you could say, from competition. But when I was competing, my goal was never to compete in the Mr. Olympia contest. It was never to call myself a pro bodybuilder. I didn't see any value in calling myself a pro bodybuilder. I didn't care about the title of pro bodybuilder. And I stayed IFBB, I stayed AAU amateur the whole time. And I wanted to develop as nice a physique as I could within reasonable limits, within genetics, within all these things considered. I never had the ability to get huge. And I thought that I would have to have that ability, or I would have to do extraordinarily dangerous things in order to get to that level of size. I didn't want to do that. And now in retrospect, I think I made the right choice. I'm remembered for having had a beautiful physique rather than a gargantuan physique. And so I would encourage people to think about aesthetics and not think about mass or something that has to do with a status, right? So a lot of times people think that if they compete in one organization, they'll get more status. I would say, you might have to think hard on whether or not that status actually pays off, whether or not you actually will get what you think you're going to get. That's why I like Muscle Beach and AAU, is because I find those organizations to be pure. I find those organizations to be the perfect setting for a bodybuilder, a physique competitor, a bikini, a figure competitor to get on a stage for the love of it, without having a huge entry fee, without, a lot of these contests and some of these promoters and some of these sanctions, they charge huge entry fees. And then when your family and friends come to see you, they have to pay large amounts of money. In fact, in some cases, you have to pay twice, 3 times. If you're in multiple divisions, you have to pay a second time, a third time. In other words, it's not like once you get into the auditorium, you can watch all there is to see. No, it's like, your mother comes to watch you. She has to pay this many dollars to watch you do, the novice. Then everybody has to leave. And then when you do the open, she's got to pay again.
That doesn't make sense.
I think that's really shameful and abusive. I really do. And I would not want my mother to have to do that. I would not want my friends to have to do that. I mean, I know that my friends and family are going to want to come to see me, right? And so I'm not going to put my misguided belief that status in this organization is worth getting on in a contest where my parents and my friends are going to have to pay 3 or 4 times more than they would have to pay anywhere else. And then I discovered that the status I thought I was going to get wasn't even that fruitful, right? So I like the purity of Muscle Beach and AAU. They let you get on the stage. Everyone feels good about their appearance. It's a modest entry fee. It's a modest fee for your friends and family to come and watch you. They give a lot of trophies out. There's no kind of like, snobbery, right? It's a nice, healthy, pure environment that isn't exploitative of the athletes. So that's the reason I like Muscle Beach and AAU.
Speaking of shows, we also explain how you get prepared for a show and what you have to go through during like 12 weeks out, 1 week out, and all the changes. Is it important that they get the right guidance during these weeks?
Well, I think at the very least, it's calming. In other words, yes, it does help them prepare better to have the information, but I think it's also less scary than it would be if a person thought, they're going into this thing completely unguided. We're helping people understand how to progress through your diet. What happens 3 months before the show? What happens 1 month before the show? What happens 3 days before the show? 6 days before the show? What happens backstage? What happens the day of the contest, right? It's important for people to feel like, look, I'm not completely, as they say, green. I'm not completely unaware. I've seen what it looks like backstage, so that you don't feel like you're going in there blind. You have big brother, let's just call him, somebody who's helping you out, know what to expect, know what to do. There are some people that, maybe have access to somebody who's done a competition before, and maybe they're being kind of, I guess you could say, coached. But I have 40 some years, so I probably have done it a few more times than most people. So anyway, that's our objective, is to try to make you feel very, very, very knowledgeable, very informed, and very comfortable entering this uncharted territory for you.
And there is also guidance after the show and what they do with that experience and the feedback.
Right. I mean, look, when you enter a contest, there's a swirl of emotion, right? The emotion that you won, the emotion that you lost. sometimes it's almost better, in a way, of course, to not have one, because it makes you say, what can I do better? If you win, sometimes you go, oh, I got this thing figured out, right? Even though you could have been much better. So either way, we always recommend that you take notes and take lots of pictures, because I can promise you this, the perspective you have that day will be different than the perspective you have a month later, a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later. So you need to record all of it as much as possible. Keep a diary, write everything down, what you did, what you ate, how you felt, what you thought. And I promise you, you will look at that stuff later, and some of it will be informative, like, oh, okay, that worked, so I'll try that again. That didn't work, so I won't try that again. But some of it will say, wow, did I really not like the way I looked that day? Because I'm looking at those pictures right now, and they look great, right? This is usually what happens. Usually we dislike the pictures more the day of the contest than we will later. Later, you'll appreciate them more. It's always been true for me.
Is the knowledge and the lessons in this program are for a certain time of period or timeless?
Well, I would say it's timeless. In the time that I've been involved in the sport, so 40 plus years, I would say that there are trends that come and go, but there's not much that I would do different. I mean, certainly, I've dieted differently in my later years because I understood a little bit more about, complex versus simple carbohydrates, high glycemic, low glycemic. But the information we're presenting right now, I believe, is pretty well forever. Biomechanics is engineering, right? Engineering's physics isn't going to change in the next 10, 20, 30 years. A lever is a lever, right? And a lever is math, right? So it magnifies force when it does this and when it does that. That will never change. And so it's pretty information that you can keep a lifetime.
And our body structure is the same. If it changes, that's where the program will change.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will ask me, is your program designed for seniors or for youth or for people that have, bodybuilding in mind? And I say, look, every elbow bends the same. Every shoulder joint moves the same, right? Every knee moves the same. Now, if you have an injury and you have scar tissue and you have some damage there that's lasting, it might alter what you can and should or should not do. But at the end of the day, that's what's important, is whether grandma is using this program or whether you're getting ready for Mr. The same motions apply as being the most healthy, the most safe, the most natural, the most bang for the buck, the most productive, right? The least counterproductive. As is the case for, let's say, if you're doing squats and you're trying to get maximum quad growth, it's kind of counterproductive when you're 1/4 of your quadricep is shutting off because your glutes are activated. So that's true for everybody. Needless to say, I'm not, and I've talked about this before, I'm not saying that squats are bad, period. What I'm saying is putting a bunch of weight on your spine, thinking that the increase in cost will translate to a commensurate increase in reward. That's absolutely not true.
Right. All right. So you heard it. The program is for everyone. It's not just for bodybuilders. You can be someone who just plays soccer or basketball. If you want to look good, this is the right program for you. The knowledge applies to everyone. We also given you $100 discount. So this offer will be available till January the 22nd. So I will put the link in the video description, and hopefully you enjoy the program. Thank you very much, Doug.
My pleasure always. Thank you, Mo. Done
a great job. Thank you. And I'll see you in the next week.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Take care.